Welcome to another edition of Grace Under Pressure, where my guest today is Dr. Ruth Gotian. I'll tell you all about Ruth, who's a second-time guest, in just a moment. Grace Under Pressure is that show that deals with the soft stuff, the stuff that we think is easy, but is really the hard stuff. It's the caring, the commitment, compassion we exert toward others. And when you do it as a leader, as you will certainly discover that Ruth is, you do it with a purposeful intention of bringing people together for common cause. Welcome, Dr. Ruth Gotian. It's an honor to have you on the show.
So good to be back with you. I'm so excited.
Well, this is a special day for you, Ruth, and I really feel honored because this is launch day for the name of your book is
The Success Factor.
Great. It's so exciting. Well, we're going to dive into that, but I wanted to give a little bit of your background. Ruth is the Chief Learning Officer and Professor of Education at Anesthesiology at Cornell Wild. She's also done extensive work in mentoring, and she's a world-class expert, and I know some of the same people she does in the academic medicine field of mentoring, and they speak highly of her. She's a contributor to Forbes and Psychology Today, where she writes about optimizing success, and that's what her book focuses on. Gives us a roadmap. She most recently was named on the Thinkers Radar, but she's now a breakthrough thinker for Thinkers 50, which is quite extraordinary. So she has a BS and MS in business management and recently got her doctorate in education. So she is Dr. Ruth. Well, that's a good one. So anyway, the name of her book is The Success Factor, Developing the Mindset and Skill Set for Peak Performance. Welcome, Ruth. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's so good to be with you, my friend.
Great. Your book is about high achievers. So
Extreme.
what led you to this topic?
So look, I always thought success was for other people, but I used to run a program called an MD PhD program. And this program had a 3.5% acceptance rate. These students were the best of the best. And I quickly realized, even amongst this group, there are people who float to the top. And I was really interested in figuring out how we can get more of those people, because their productivity and their impact would more than make up for anybody who is leaving the workforce. So at the age of 43, I went back to school, really started taking a deep, deep dive into this. And here we are. That was a while ago.
So this book is extraordinary because it's almost a who's who of high achievers. The one that pops to my brain right now is Dr. Anthony Fauci. So what led to that connection?
So my original research for my doctorate was on physician scientists, those who have the MD and also do research. It was closely tied to my job, to the work that I was doing. And long before COVID, those of us who work in academic medicine, we knew who Tony Fauci was. He advised many, many presidents and multiple pandemics. So he was, so I knew him and I knew many of the other Nobel scientists. And then after I finished my degree, I wanted to know if the 4 things I found with the physician scientist really held true for other extreme high achievers. And that led to the astronauts and the Olympians and the CEOs and the book, The Success Factor.
So what are those 4 key factors? Did they apply? And what about for normal people like me?
Yeah, John, that's what was so fascinating to me, is that what the Nobel Prize winning scientist does, right? What Fauci does, what Dr. Fauci does, is the same thing that an Olympic champion figure skater would do. And that's when I realized that because these are identical, we can cross-pollinate industries, and it's the same 4 elements. And that was my aha moment. That's when I realized that success could be learned. Because most of these people were not born with the silver spoon in their mouth. They weren't born with this high pedigree. They worked for it. So that's what I wanted to do, was create that blueprint. So I figured it out, reverse engineered it, created the plan, and here we are.
Well, I love that because this book will be valuable for coaches because I've always likened executive coaching to, well, it is performance-based coaching, but I often, when people explain it to them, and quote lay people, in other words, the rest of the world, I use the Olympic athlete metaphor. Every good athlete has a coach. So this is it. So what are the 4 basic category or factors we need to know about, Ruth?
So there are 4, and the trick is you have to do all 4 simultaneously. You can't pick and choose what you're going to do. But if you were going to start with one, I would say tap into your intrinsic motivation, your passion, your purpose, why you were put on this earth, right? What you would do for free if you could. So for example, you like science, you're good at it. Maybe you had a family member who suffered from cancer. And you don't want anyone else to face and experience that devastation, that hurt, that loss. So you're going to take your love of science and your fuel is that person who was close to you with that cancer. And you're going to work for it. You're really going to work for it because this is your passion. You're not doing it for the Nobel Prize or the promotion or the awards or the rewards. The reward comes from within. It's intrinsic motivation comes from within. That's number 1. Number 2.
So important. I want to jump in right there because that is so important for people. We hear these success stories about people, and it's never about the gold or the award. Yeah. It's just what I love doing. So please continue.
That's absolutely right. Because if it was about the medal, they would have all quit after they got it, and they didn't. I don't know of a single Nobel Prize winner who quit after getting the Nobel Prize. It just doesn't happen. Right. So that was 1. Number 2, when you figured out what it is that you love, you are going to outwork everybody. And I don't mean you're going to put in 18-hour days. I mean you're not going to give up so easily. So let's go back to that scientist who's looking for a treatment for cancer. His experiments or her experiments didn't work. The grant wasn't funded. The paper was rejected. Do you think they're going to quit looking for a treatment for cancer? Are they going to say, let me figure out what I learned from this and double down? That's what they're going to do. They look at challenges very differently. They don't question if they will overcome the challenge. They know that they will. Instead, they think about how they will overcome the challenge. What is the strategy I have not thought of yet? That's 2. Ready for 3?
Oh, yeah.
3 is that strong foundation, which is constantly being reinforced. What they did early in their career, they're going to do later in their career. So let's look at Neil Katial. Neil Katial argued 45 cases before the Supreme Court. You know him?
Oh, absolutely. I see him probably 3 times a week or something on MSNBC. He teaches at my alma mater, Georgetown. So
that's right. So he has argued 45 cases before the Supreme Court, more than any other minority lawyer. Now, go ask the lawyers who you know and ask them, how many cases have you argued before the Supreme Court? Most of them will not even have 1. Neil Katial had 45. And I asked him, and I think he's still going, I said, Neil, how do you prepare for your cases? And he said, I do 3 things. And it's been the same 3 things for all 45 cases. I prepare a binder that has the question and answer for every question I might get asked. He said, I've never even opened that binder, but I take it with me. I put it on the table. It's in front of me. But just the practice of preparing that binder prepared me for the case. Then he has moot courts. These are simulated courts that they do to practice. He's done that for case number 1 all the way through 45, and not 1. Early on, he used to do 15. Now he does about 5, but the point is he still does them. And last but not least, the night before the opening arguments, he goes to his children's room and he starts explaining the case to them in the simplest of terms. Because if a child can understand it, if it could be that simple, he's trimming all the fat away and the court will understand it.
I love that. I love that model because it's the diligence, it's the preparation. And actually, as you were going through there, it reminded me some of concert musicians, pianists who practice the same scales, same scales I do, but infinitely better. But the same pieces, the same parts of pieces, the same phrasing, the same this over and over and over again. And that ain't fun, but they do it. Same thing with athletes. So this is hard work. So there's no magic success. That's great. And I love the final thing.
And it's the same thing, because one of the people who I interviewed was Ryan Millar, a 3-time Olympian, won the gold medal in volleyball. And he told me the most important thing in volleyball is not how high you can jump, it's ball control. And he would tell me that this warm-up they would do before any practice or any game is called pepper, which really works on the ball control. He said, we did that at the Olympics. We did the same thing in my backyard when I was 7 years old playing with my brother. Nothing changes. You have to get those foundational skills right. That's
so
3. Ready for 4?
Yeah.
Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Mark Cuban. They read 3 to 8 hours a day. It's not reading that made them billionaires. It's being open to new knowledge. They're looking for information and looking for gaps in understanding, and they're connecting dots that other people don't yet see. They're also taking something from one industry and flipping it on its head and using it in another industry. That's innovation. The only way they're able to do that is being open to new knowledge. So I'm a big reader. Reading for hours a day sounds like heaven to me. But if that's not you, you don't need to worry, because there are other ways that you can absorb new knowledge. So you can read books, you can read articles, you can listen to podcasts, webinars, LinkedIn Learning, LinkedIn Live. Hopefully we're sharing good stuff here, right?
Absolutely, LinkedIn Live. You know what I love about this is the openness, and you said a magic word, and I've seen people do this. I've been with gifted business people, and obviously Buffett is in that category. They see what others don't see. Maybe it's a spreadsheet, whatever, connections. Bill Gates, certainly. I've talked to people who've worked with him. And what that is that, and then that look, comparison from different fields, it harkens back to a previous life of mine when the automotive industry was trying to make its dealer network more friendly, and so borrowed lessons from the hoteliers, just as healthcare has done. You've probably seen that in healthcare now. So learning from another field. So it's wonderful.
Right. Don't reinvent the wheel. That's what my mentor said to me. There's nothing new under the sun. What's new is how you look at it.
That's so true. So you mentioned, so does mentorship play a role in high achievement? So
absolutely, an enormous role. And in fact, part of that informal learning is that these high achievers learn by talking to each other. And they didn't have just one mentor, they had a team of mentors who believed in them more than they believed in themselves. So having that team is so important, because they're going to be by your side for the long run.
Well, I want to drill down into the subtitle of your book, which is mindset and skill set. So let's take them apart. What is in high achievement? What is the mindset? Is it the 4 things that you told us, or is there something different? So,
well, very often we hear the billionaires, the high achievers wake up at 5 a.m., go wake up at 5 a.m. That's fabulous. I'm a morning person. But if you're a night owl and you don't go to bed till 2 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to start waking up at 5 a.m. Yeah. But what we can learn from this is the mindset. So for example, I told you that Buffett and Gates and Cuban read 3 to 8 hours a day. That's their habit. But that is not their mindset. The mindset is being open to new information. So it's what we're pulling out of those habits, that mindset. And that mindset, we can actually teach you how to implement. And in fact, the last third of the book is all about implementation strategies, because I am an adult educator. So I can't just tell you what to do without teaching you how to do it. And what I do, and this is part of that skill set, is that I fully understand that what works for you, John, is not going to work for me. And what works for me today is not going to work for me always. It's not going to work for me when I have a transition. So I need to know how to pivot. And that's why for each one of those 4 elements, I created a buffet of options that anybody could choose from.
I love a buffet of options.
Buffet of options. Adults like choices.
Yeah, good. So that's the mindset. And the skill set, is that the buffet of options or the different ways to implement it?
Buffet of options. That's correct. How to implement it.
I think what gives such resonance and will have lasting impact to your book is both the research that you've done, the stories of the great people in there, but also the back third. And I love, I had a professor once that called it recipe books. So that's important for us. It gives people, especially small-minded people like me, something to hang on to. Do you agree with that, Ruth?
I do. And I wanted the book that I always wished was around. And I have been trained in adult learning and leadership, and I understand the basic principles, and I needed to bridge theory and practice. Nobody just wants to hear theory. No one's going to be interested in that. I could geek out on it. Not so many people could, but knowing how to implement it so that you can improve your own life, that's where the magic is. That's where the magic is. That's where everyone could just hang on to that and do it.
And that leads to my next question, because we hear the term lifelong learner, and nobody's going to say, I'm not a lifelong learner, but I'm a busy person. I've got a lot on my plate. I'm a parent or whatever, and I've got a lot of things going on. Okay, what does it mean to become a lifelong learner? Is there something we need to overcome, or is it born within us, Ruth? So
you just need to be open to new knowledge. And there's so many ways that you can do that. You don't have to sit in a classroom. In fact, that's really difficult for adults to do. We have a job, we have family responsibilities, we have a mortgage to pay for, rent to pay. Having that extra tuition bill, having that time in a classroom, we're just not built for that anymore. So we really need to open our minds. Right. But, it took me 20 years between my master's and my doctorate to go back because I had to be ready for it. You don't want to start doing something like this until you want it so badly you can't not do it.
But you're making this accessible, and I like the way where you talked about the Buffett and Cuban being readers of 3 to 8 hours. But it's how you learn, and that's important. I remember Peter Drucker once wrote one of his most famous essays. Toward the end, it was like managing oneself, and he talked about learn how you learn, and I love that kind of analogy. I think that's what you're getting at too, correct? So
yes, and I actually talk about that in the book, about the different types of learning styles. And I don't mean the visual or kinesthetic. That's sort of been kind of debunked, but there are other ways. Do you like to hear things? Do you like to see things? Do you like to draw it out? Do you like to talk it out? And there are different ways that people are learning. There's no one right way. As a friend of mine said, we are all different variations of normal.
Mm-hmm.
So these are different variations of normal.
It brings up a story, and it's about, and I think it's the learning process. And it was after the Bay of Pigs, which was a disaster for the Kennedy administration, and Jack Kennedy owned it, even though it had really been an Eisenhower administration project, but he just sort of went along with it. And Ike came in, and they just had a conversation, and he said, well, did you get any feedback on this stuff? And he goes, yeah. I said, I interviewed everybody and talked about it. And Ike said something very important, and I think a lot of leaders can learn from this. And he said, did you have them all in the same room at the same time? That is interesting. So do you have a comment on that?
It's about learning from each other. And there's definitely great wisdom in that, in learning from each other, because you can build on what you hear. You may not have all the answers. There's no one person that will have all the answers. But if you build on each other's knowledge, you can actually create something bigger and better than any one person could have done on their own.
Well, and we talk a lot about in the theory of leadership right now. It's an avant-garde. I used to make a joke that it's the one thing they don't teach you in business school is humility. Well, I think actually they're teaching that, and they teach it in medical school too. But what's interesting is learning is it requires a sense of humility, does it not?
It certainly does. And I think it wasn't until my doctorate that I actually picked up on that, is that you have to get very, very comfortable with saying, I don't know. I don't know. And I don't know what I don't know. And that's actually something that really was a common thread with all the high achievers. They weren't just humble in their successes. They understood that they don't have all the answers. They don't even have all the questions. And they were willing to get that information from anyone who has it, even if the person is a generation younger than them, even if they outrank the person. This wasn't about rank or hierarchy. This was about getting the information they need to move a project forward. Do you have that information? Can you share it, or you can't?
Oh, you just opened the door for it, because I know this is your life's work on men, other than this book, and your 3 wonderful children, is mentoring. So tell me about being mentored by a younger person. Have you encountered that, and what are the joys and pitfalls of that? So
I have been in both ends of that, mentor and a mentee. Look, I am not a digital native. I was not born with an email address. I was not born with a social media account. Some people open it for their kids before they're even born, right? And they keep sending them pictures.
I haven't heard that one yet. But
yeah, but that wasn't me. And I share this story. I was at a conference years ago recruiting students in my previous role. And if you've ever been to these conferences, it's in these enormous convention centers, and you get your booth and you're talking to people one at a time. If you're lucky, it's 3 people together. And for 3 days, you're saying the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. And you're hoping that the 100th or 1,000th time you said it, you sound just as excited as the first and second time that you were saying it. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, I walk into this big convention center in St. Louis, and they had this easel with a big board on it. And there's a picture of what I thought was a pound symbol. It was actually a hashtag and a little blue bird. And this must have been around 2003. And I had no idea what was happening, but everyone was walking around like this, just staring at their phone. And I said, what is happening here? What happened to conversations? So I pulled over a student. I said, what is this tweet? I don't understand. What is happening? And that's when he showed me his phone. And he told me about Twitter. And I got a crash course in the conversations that were happening on social media and why it's important and the impact it could have. And he was just teaching me and teaching me and teaching me. That night, I sat on the floor of my hotel room at around 11 o'clock at night and opened my first Twitter account. I didn't have a picture. I had an egg. Remember those? But all of a sudden, the conversations I was trying to have one-on-one, I was now able to have one with thousands of people at a time. And it was someone a generation younger than me who was able to mentor me through that as I try to figure out, how do you turn this on? How do you turn it off? What are all these notifications?
That's great. Now, I want to get back to the book, Success Factor, and you've interviewed so many people. There's also sometimes a perception, absolutely, a perception that we look at Neil Katial or a Mark Cuban or Warren Buffett, whatever, and they were going, well, it all happened to them, and aren't they lucky? How did the people that you studied, what lessons did you learn that they learned from adversity or even defeat?
I think they learned to embrace it. And in fact, the one theme that kept coming up over and over and over again was that they feared not trying more than they feared failing. They're okay with failing. They're not okay with not trying. And they did this over and over and over again. And one of the stories you'll hear there is our mutual friend, NFL Hall of Famer, Curtis Martin. And his story is just one for a Hallmark special. And talk about facing failure over and over and over again. But you know what? Every time that happened, he said, what can I learn from this experience? What do I need to tweak? What do I need to change? What do I need to learn? And he reimagined how he does things over and over again, all the way to the NFL Hall of Fame.
That's such a powerful story, and I'm glad you shared it. And as you were explaining, what flashed to my mind was the military habit of after action review, and that was what Curtis was doing, and I think so many other successors. I think it's the idea of, okay, I got knocked down. What can I learn from it? Is that what you're explaining, Ruth?
Yeah, it's yes. And it's also for when things succeeded, they also did after action reviews. Even when it succeeded, did it happen as effectively, efficiently, productively, impactfully as it could have? Or could we have done it better? And it doesn't matter if you're an athlete or a scientist or a CEO, whatever it is, it's the same practice. You constantly learn from everything that you're doing.
And I think it's interesting because I want to get in this because you talked about Nobel laureates and when they don't stop their science, but someone like Curtis had a finite time span to his career. He was an NFL, one of the greatest running backs in NFL history. There's a physical lifespan. Curtis has gone on to do other things. So
That's
what
right.
did you learn from him about that transition? So
Yeah, and it could be Curtis or it could be anyone else. I asked them, when you hung up your cleats or or your sneakers or whatever it is, they said no regrets. No regrets, because there's another goal right afterward. And in fact, if you ask any of these people where they keep their medals, all of them, I always ask the Olympians, I said, can you show me your medals? Only 2 of them had it on display. Everyone else, it's in my mom's basement, it's in a box under my bed, it's in the nightstand. One of them had it in a brown paper bag in his sock drawer. I said, I don't understand how you don't wear it to the supermarket. And they said, it was never about the medals. That's just one chapter in my life. It's not the entire story. And they say when they knew that was it, they had no regrets. They had their next goal all lined up.
That's important. And that's where so many people do get in trouble because what's next? And they don't have that. And that's why we have your book, The Success Factor, to help people develop that skill set to take their mindset to the next level. So, Ruth, we are racing through this program. I could go another hour here, but as you know, because you are a two-time guest, I ask everyone a question about grace. Do you have a story you'd like to share with us? So.
Yeah, look, I think I have a whole new meaning for grace, which really came from writing this book. This book was written on weekends because I have a full-time job. I had to write it on weekends, and I had a strict timeline from my editor. And I'm a fast writer, but and I gave myself a goal of how many words I was going to write every weekend. And some weekends the words flowed, and other days they didn't. And what I learned was that within this timeline and these goals and these milestones I set for myself, I needed to put in a buffer. I needed to set some grace for myself, because that grace allowed me to have writer's block. But it also allowed me to be so creative where I can't type fast enough. It really just buffered things on both ends for me. And for that,
I
I
love
learned to give myself
that.
grace.
I've spoken to well over 140 plus interviews and different dimensions of grace, but no one has ever likened grace to writing. And so many of the folks I've spoken to have been authors like yourself. So what a wonderful thing. Show yourself some grace. But that's so important for us in our lives, whether we write a word or not. Show yourself some grace. So
that's right.
So that's great. And this book, I think it's going to have a long shelf life because it combines the winning elements of storytelling, but also that's sheer practicality. So what's your goal? I always get asked this question. And so ask me, I'm going to ask you. What's the takeaway that you want people to have from this book, The Success Factor, Ruth? So
I'll leave it with 2 takeaways that were said to me by both my mentor and by Dr. Tony Fauci. First is, do something important, not just interesting. Because if it's interesting to you. That's a hobby. But if it's important, it will have an impact, and the impact will have a ripple effect. And if you want that to happen, if you want to leave this world better than you found it, then do something important, not just interesting. And in order to make that happen, you have to fear not trying more than you fear failing.
Correct. Fear not trying more than you do. That's great. So, Ruth, it's been a joy to have you on the show. How can people find you? Oh,
Sure. So I can be found all the social media. My website is Ruth Gotian, and the book is wherever you love buying books, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or wherever you are in the world. If you want to know, just go to my website, ruthgotian.com/book.
well, great. Ruth, it's a pleasure to have you on launch day of all things. Thanks. It's a busy, busy day for you. So I'm honored that you would make time for us.
Always.
Thank you. So.
Thank you, John. Bye, everybody.